Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. Um, Noam Chomsky's Language and Mind.
Oh, a classic.
It is, and we're looking at, the third edition, updated for the 21st century. So clearly these ideas are still relevant. It's interesting how much these questions about language and the mind kind of keep coming back.
Yeah, they do. I mean, Chomsky really gets at some fundamental questions about, well, what makes us human? Things like, is language really unique to us? Are we kind of pre-wired for it in some way?
And the way the book's structured is interesting too. I mean, these aren't like dense academic papers. They're essays, and they're written, for a more general audience.
Right, right. He's trying to make these complex ideas a little more approachable, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think, deep dive like this comes in handy because we can sort of untangle some of the more intricate concepts and really highlight why they matter.
Absolutely. And not just for linguists, but I think for anyone who's interested in, well, how our minds work.
Exactly. So to kick things off, one of Chomsky's, I think, central arguments is that we can't just learn language through exposure alone.
Right, right. There's got to be something more going on.
So it's like he's saying there must be some kind of inborn capacity for language.
Right. Yeah. And he uses this argument called the poverty of the stimulus. Basically, it means that the linguistic information that a child encounters is just not enough to explain how they become, fluent speakers so quickly.
Hmm. It's like they're cracking a complex code with only like half the pieces or something.
Exactly.
So is that where this idea of universal grammar comes in?
It is. Universal grammar, or UG for short, it's kind of Chomsky's term for this innate blueprint for language. This idea that, well, humans are born with this predisposition, this set of underlying principles that guide how we learn and structure any language we're exposed to.
Okay, so it's not that we're born knowing, English or Mandarin or whatever, but that our brains kind of have this underlying framework that makes it possible to acquire any of those specific languages, right?
Right. Think of it like the foundation of a building. You need that solid base before you can add the walls, the roof, all the unique design elements. And UG is like that foundation for language.
Oh, I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
It makes this abstract idea a little more concrete.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, how does he explore these big ideas in the book? How's the book structured?
Well, it's divided into chapters, and each chapter kind of tackles a different aspect of, well, language and the mind.
I see. So it's like a journey through Chomsky's thought process.
Exactly. A journey.
All right. Well, let's start that journey then. The preface, I hear, was added in this third edition
You're right.
to kind of give some context to the rest of the book.
Right. It's interesting because he reflects on the kind of intellectual climate when the first edition was published back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And he compares it to the scientific thinking of the 17th century, especially the work of René Descartes.
Descartes, I think, therefore I am.
Exactly.
But how does a philosopher from the 1600s connect to, modern linguistics?
Oh, Descartes was really interested in what made humans different from machines.
Okay.
And he saw language as a key part of that. For him, being able to use language creatively was a sign of a true mind, not just some complex mechanism.
So even back then, people were wrestling with those questions about like the nature of intelligence and consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. And those questions are more relevant than ever today.
Right, with the rise of AI and everything.
Exactly. And Chomsky sees that connection too. He kind of builds on Descartes' ideas. He argues that the human capacity for generating an infinite number of, novel sentences points to something unique and complex about our minds.
Yeah, it's like saying that true language understanding goes beyond just processing, words and grammar.
Yeah.
It requires this deeper level of like meaning making and creativity.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to chapter 1, he takes us even further back in time. He starts exploring linguistic contributions from the past.
Oh, a historical deep dive within a deep dive.
Exactly. And he starts with a lesser-known figure, Juan Huart,
Okay.
a Spanish physician from the 16th century. Huarte was interested in human intelligence, and he developed this fascinating theory about its different levels.
A physician theorizing about
Oh,
intelligence.
I know, right? It's a little surprising. But back then, disciplines weren't as, siloed as they are today.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were these levels of intelligence? What did he come up with?
Okay, so he proposed 3 levels: docile wit, normal human intelligence, and then true creativity.
Okay, docile wit, what's that?
So he described docile wit as the most basic level. the kind of learning through, sensory experience that we see in, well, animals, for instance.
Okay.
It's about forming associations, responding to stimuli. Think of Pavlov's dogs.
Oh, yeah, right. Learning through conditioning.
Exactly.
So then normal human intelligence, that goes a step further.
Exactly. He saw it as our ability to form concepts, to understand abstract ideas,
Mm.
to express ourselves in ways that go beyond simply reacting to our environment.
So problem solving, imagining, communicating in complex ways.
Exactly. And then the highest level, true creativity. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
He describes it as like a touch of divine madness. It's the source of, groundbreaking insights, innovations, artistic expression. Think of, geniuses like Einstein or Picasso. They seem to operate on another level.
So where does language fit into all of this?
Well, Harte, like many thinkers of his time, saw language as a key marker of what separates us from animals. He believed it was, the ultimate expression of our higher intelligence, particularly that divine madness of true creativity.
So he's basically saying that humans don't just use language, but they create with it in a way that other animals don't.
Exactly. And this idea of language as a creative force, as a reflection of our unique cognitive abilities, it's a thread that runs throughout Chomsky's work.
It's fascinating to see these historical perspectives, connected to the questions that Chomsky's grappling with.
Yeah, it shows these questions aren't new, right? They've been around for centuries,
Right.
and they still kind of, challenge us and intrigue us today.
You do. It definitely feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
So what's next on this exploration of language and mind?
Well, in chapter 2, we shift gears a bit. We move from the past to Chomsky's present, and he tackles what he saw as kind of a prevailing trend in linguistics during his time, something he wasn't too happy with.
Okay, so we're moving from like the 16th century to the 20th century.
Yeah.
What was going on in linguistics that he found so intriguing, or should I say, maybe problematic?
Yeah, he felt that linguists had become a bit too preoccupied with simply, describing the structure of languages, almost like creating a detailed inventory of the parts.
So instead of asking like why questions about language, they were focusing on what questions.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this approach was heavily influenced by behaviorism, a school of thought that tried to explain all behavior, including language, through, conditioning and reinforcement.
Oh, so the idea was that we learn language the same way that like a dog learns to sit on command, right?
Right.
Through repetition and reward.
Exactly. And B.F. Skinner's verbal behavior was like a key text in this movement.
Okay.
Skinner argued that language was nothing more than a set of, learned responses to stimuli.
But Chomsky, he clearly wasn't on board with that view.
He was not. He argued that behaviorism, while useful for understanding, certain types of learning, couldn't fully account for the incredible creativity and complexity of human language.
So what specifically did he point to?
Well, he pointed out that we constantly produce and understand sentences we've never heard before. Think about it. You and we're having this conversation right now.
Right.
We're creating unique sentences on the fly.
Yeah.
No amount of conditioning can really explain that level of flexibility.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, if language was just a collection of like memorized phrases, we wouldn't be able to express new ideas or have, nuanced conversations like this one.
Exactly. So Chomsky felt that reducing language to a set of, learned responses, it missed the bigger picture, the underlying cognitive mechanisms that allow us to be so creative with language.
Yeah, he was advocating for a deeper understanding of language,
Mm.
one that went beyond just cataloging its features.
Exactly. He felt that linguistics needed to address those bigger why questions, the ones that delve into the relationship between language and the mind.
That's a great segue into chapter 3. I think that's where he focuses on his vision for the future of linguistics.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so what direction did he think linguistics should take? What was his vision?
He argued that the future of linguistics lies in understanding how language is acquired and used, not just describing its structure.
So it's not enough to know like the rules of a language,
Right.
the way we know the rules of a game.
Exactly.
We need to understand how those rules are internalized and put into practice.
Right. It's like the difference between Knowing the layout of a chessboard
Okay.
and understanding the strategies and tactics of a skilled chess player.
Oh, I like that. So how does this vision for the future of linguistics translate into like specific research questions?
Well, this is where he introduces the concept of generative grammar.
Okay.
It's a system of rules that can generate, all the grammatically correct sentences in a language.
So it's like having a blueprint that allows you to build an infinite number of houses,
Yeah.
each one unique,
Okay.
but still adhering to the same like architectural principles.
That's a great analogy. That's
Yeah.
exactly what generative grammar is trying to do. Model the underlying system that allows us to create, an infinite number of meaningful sentences.
So it's all starting to connect these ideas about the structure of language and its acquisition
Yeah.
and this connection to the mind are coming together to paint a more complete picture.
That's what makes Chomsky's work so compelling. He's challenging us to see language not just as, a tool for communication, but as a window into the very nature of human intelligence.
Okay. I'm ready to go even deeper.
Okay, let's do it.
What does he explore next?
Well, chapter 4. He tackles a question that's been around, well, for centuries. Can studying animal communication shed light on human language?
Ooh, now that's a question that's been on my mind too. We see documentaries showing, intricate communication systems in animals like primates using sign language or dolphins seemingly talking to each other.
Mm.
And it's tempting to think that maybe those examples are just like simpler versions of human language, right?
It's easy to draw that parallel,
Yeah.
but Chomsky challenges that assumption, head on.
Okay.
He argues that there's a fundamental difference between animal communication and human language, a difference in kind, not just in degree.
So we're not just at the top of some like communication ladder with animals on the lower rungs.
Right.
It's something more profound than that.
Exactly. Chomsky's point is that human language is an entirely different category. It's not just about signaling basic needs or emotions.
Mhm.
It's about being able to generate an infinite number of, novel expressions, about expressing abstract ideas, sharing complex thoughts, creating, art with words.
And he uses the European Robin song as an example to illustrate this, right?
He does. Because even though the Robin song seems complex, it's still fundamentally different from human language.
Right, right. It can convey specific information, but it can't express abstract ideas, tell stories, or create new meanings in the way that we can with human language.
Right. It's like the Robin is playing a set of, pre-recorded messages,
Yeah.
whereas humans can compose entire, symphonies with language.
Okay, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So this difference for Chomsky goes back to that idea of universal grammar then.
It does.
He's arguing that we have this innate capacity, this mental blueprint that allows for this kind of boundless creativity.
Right.
That just isn't present in other animals.
At least not to the same degree.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just that human language is more complex,
Right.
but it operates on a fundamentally different level, right?
Exactly. It's like saying that while both humans and birds build nests, only
Yeah.
humans build skyscrapers.
I like that.
There's a qualitative difference there, a leap in complexity and creativity.
Right. And that leap really challenges the traditional evolutionary view that everything develops gradually, step by step.
Right.
It's like saying human language emerged not as this slow evolution of animal communication, but as a sudden burst of something entirely new.
Right. That's a good way to think about it. Chomsky acknowledges that there might be evolutionary precursors, but he insists that at some point there was this qualitative shift, an emergence of something fundamentally different that set human language apart.
That's a pretty significant insight.
Yeah.
It really changes how we think about the evolution of language
Yeah.
and maybe even the evolution of, human consciousness.
It does, and this is what makes the study of language all the more, intriguing. It's not just about understanding how we communicate. It's about understanding the human mind itself.
Okay, so my mind is definitely buzzing.
Good.
What's next on this Chomsky journey?
Well, in chapter 5, we dive into the kind of the nitty-gritty of language structure, and Chomsky delves into these concepts of linguistic competence and linguistic performance.
Okay. I've heard those terms before, but I could use a refresher.
Yeah.
Are they about the difference between like knowing the rules of language and actually using them in real world situations?
You got it. That's it. So he uses competence to refer to our underlying knowledge of language, that mental grammar book we all carry around.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And performance refers to our actual use of language, which, as we all know, can be messy and imperfect.
Right. I mean, I might ace a grammar test, showing I have, quote, competence, but still, get tongue-tied giving a presentation. Right.
That's a great example. And Chomsky argues that linguists should focus more on studying competence because that's where the true system of language resides. The underlying rules that govern how we structure sentences and create meaning.
So it's like saying, don't judge a car engine by how it sounds when it's sputtering. Look at the blueprint. Look at the design to understand how it's supposed to work.
Exactly, and it's in this chapter that Chomsky also introduces these famous concepts of surface structure and deep structure.
Ooh, those sound familiar. But refresh my memory. What are those all about?
Okay, think of it like this. Surface structure is the literal order of words in a sentence. What you see on the page or hear spoken aloud, it's the outward form.
Okay, got it. Deep structure.
Deep structure is the underlying meaning of the sentence. The relationships between the different words and phrases and the core idea being conveyed.
Oh, yeah.
It's the level of meaning that our minds kind of grasp, even when the surface structure might be different.
So two sentences can have completely different surface structures, but still have the same deep structure, meaning they essentially mean the same thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the sentences, the cat chased the mouse, and the mouse was chased by the cat.
Yeah.
They have different surface structures, but they both convey that same underlying meaning. A cat engaging in the act of, chasing a mouse.
So our minds are able to decode that deep structure.
Yeah.
The core meaning, even if the word order or the grammatical construction is different on the surface.
Exactly. And this distinction it's crucial for understanding, how we process language. It highlights that we're not just responding to words in isolation.
Right.
We're constructing meaning from the relationships between them.
And this is where those generative rules that we talked about earlier come in, right?
Yeah.
They're operating at that deep structure level, allowing us to manipulate and combine elements.
Yeah.
To create an infinite variety of sentences while still preserving meaning.
That's exactly it. And this whole idea of deep structure really, really challenges traditional views of language, shifting the focus from simply the words we use to the underlying cognitive processes that allow us to create and understand complex meaning.
Yeah. This deep dive is getting pretty deep.
It is.
It's fascinating to see how these abstract concepts connect to our everyday experience of language.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's next?
Well, chapter 6. This is where Chomsky kind of takes on the philosophical implications of his theories and directly addresses some of the criticisms and debates that they sparked.
Okay, I'm ready for some philosophical sparring.
Okay, let's go.
What does he tackle in this chapter?
Well, he really takes aim at the empiricists, those who believe that all knowledge comes from experience.
Right.
And this is where he really defends his idea of an innate language faculty.
Cool.
He argues against the notion that we learn language purely through, exposure and reinforcement.
So he's pushing back against the blank slate view of the mind, right? The idea that we're born with no innate knowledge, and that everything we know comes from our experiences.
Exactly. And he revisits that poverty of the stimulus argument, saying there's simply not enough information in a child's environment to account for how quickly and effortlessly they learn language.
Yeah.
There has to be something more, something innate that guides and structures the learning process.
It's like saying you can't build a skyscraper with just a handful of bricks.
Right.
You need a blueprint,
a
plan that dictates the structure and organization of the building.
Exactly. And that blueprint for Chomsky is this innate schematism.
Okay.
It's a mental structure that's present from birth, and it guides language acquisition. It acts like a filter, helping us to make sense of the linguistic data we encounter and to build a coherent grammar.
So it's like we're born with a mental template for language.
Yeah.
A framework that allows us to to organize the sounds and the words that we hear into meaningful patterns and structures.
That's a good way to visualize it. And this innate schematism, Chomsky argues, helps to explain the remarkable uniformity of language acquisition across cultures.
Oh, so even though there's incredible diversity in the languages spoken around the world,
Yeah.
there's an underlying universality in the cognitive processes that allow us to learn them.
Exactly. It's a profound insight, and it suggests that there's a deep connection between language and the human mind, a connection that goes beyond the specific, sounds and words of any particular language.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all starting to make sense. How these ideas about innate structures and universal principles can help explain this amazing, this amazing feat of language acquisition. It really challenges, traditional views of language and offers this whole new way of thinking about how our minds work.
It does, and it sets the stage for the final chapter where Chomsky really brings his thinking into, the 21st century with his concept of biolinguistics.
Okay, bring on the 21st century.
Right. Let's do it.
What does he have in store for us in this final chapter?
Well, it's in chapter 7 that he really solidifies his argument for the biolinguistic perspective.
Okay.
The idea that language is just as much a part of our biology as our heart or our lungs.
So it's not just something that we pick up from our culture, like, learning table manners.
Right.
Or social customs. It's rooted in the very structure of our brains.
Exactly. A product of our evolutionary heritage.
Right. And he returns to and expands upon these ideas about universal grammar, arguing that it provides this framework for understanding the amazing diversity of human languages,
Right.
while still recognizing their shared underlying principles, right?
Exactly. It's like saying that all houses, despite their, various architectural styles, still need foundations, walls, and a roof to function as shelter. There are universal principles at play, even within the diversity of designs.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So, and this is where he introduces this principles and parameters framework, which attempts to explain how universal grammar actually works. Right?
I got it.
Okay, principles and parameters. Those sound familiar, but I need a little more clarity. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. Think of it this way: the principles are the universal laws of language.
Okay.
The fundamental rules that apply to every human language. These are the bedrock.
So things like nouns and verbs and phrases and the ways they combine to create meaning, those would be considered principles.
Exactly. They're like the grammatical DNA that's shared across all languages. But then you have the parameters,
Right.
which act like switches that can be flipped on or off, leading to variations in how those universal principles are expressed.
So the parameters account for the differences between languages then.
Yeah.
The different ways we structure sentences or conjugate verbs.
Right. For example, one parameter might determine whether the subject of a sentence comes before the verb, like in English,
Okay.
or after the verb, like in Japanese.
Right.
It's a small shift, but it changes the entire flow and structure of the sentence.
Right. So it's like having a universal blueprint for building cars,
Yeah.
but with a set of, customizable options that